One is a dramatic television play that presents as somber yet uplifting. The other is a full feature treatment that won 17 different awards, including Best Picture. Marty, They Remade It.
What happened? Hey Marty, hey Marty, hey Marty, what happened with you? Saturday we had a party. Frankie and Lou, everybody but you. Where was your Thursday? Hey Marty, hey Marty, hey Marty, for our bowling game. It seems like a year since we chugged a mug of beer. Hey Marty, you must have a dame, a dame. Hey Marty, you must have a dame, must have a dame.
And welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
And welcome to the newest season. Season number... Oh, God. I don't know now. 6?
7.
5? 7. Jesus.
You're going backwards.
My God.
No, 7. Episode, I don't know, 105, 113. Who knows? We passed 100 last... Actually, I'm sorry. I just backtracked because it reminded me of this. I have some news for last year of the podcast. I was going through and tallying the episodes and changing some of the thumbnails around because I talked with Hannah a bit following the Mean Girls episode. She had a really good idea for thematic thumbnails, and while I was in there, because I didn't have an asset saved with proper alpha channels, I just redid the whole thing to sort of upscale it, make it higher quality. It was a bit pixelated before because I did it on a laptop that I used at college, but so I think it's looking better now. Anyways, I was in the back end modifying some stuff, and there was a mistake in our podcast player. We had 2 episode 63s somehow.
Oh, hell.
2 episode 63s, so I renumbered. Lord of the Rings is now our 101st episode. So the 100th episode of our podcast ended up being about Hitman.
Oh, no.
So what a great celebration. But there's nothing that can be done.
Well, one thing that could have been done, you could have just, reordered them. We could have said that Lord of the Rings was 100 and Hitman was 101.
I mean, yeah, I guess we could have done that, potentially.
Do you want to do that now?
It depends on what the full circle looks like. I don't want to be reading off full circle in the Lord of the Rings episode and being like, hey, we just saw this guy in Hitman. Hitman episode has not come out yet. I'll think about it. There are worse offenses.
Yeah, well, our bad on that one, folks.
Very, very funny. But yeah, that's podcasting 2024. Now we're new year, new me. We just saw each other, and we almost recorded in person for the first time since Ghostbusters back in 2018.
And then we didn't.
We got distracted. Literally no reason other than that. We had every opportunity and just didn't do it.
So I think we're fine. I think this is a good format we've had up to this point. I think not having to worry about effectively work while hanging out for the first time together in a while is, I think, just fine.
Yeah. Only thing is now I gotta edit. Damn it! I could have gotten off scot-free, single channel, but that is
my condolences.
That's besides the point. Let's go a bit into what we've been doing over the break.
Sure.
Since I'm reading the plot synopsis, I'll go first, and I'll kind of bridge the gap into yours because we both did see something together.
True. Several things, in fact, if you count the other event we went to, but we'll get to that.
Oh, yeah, that is right. Not a movie, but still something we experienced. At any rate, I watched a handful of movies over the course of the break. I have been starting to get caught up like I did last year on all of the Oscar nominees. Once again, I've seen a surprising number of these since I've been more actively going to the theater, so there's not as much I need to get caught up on. I ended up watching the new Wallace and Gromit, for example, which I was holding out hope I would be able to see on the big screen, but for whatever reason, of all the theaters that are showing this fucking thing, none of the ones near me are, including the really nice one that is always showing shit like this. So I had to watch it on Netflix on a subpar screen. There are worse fates, but I really wanted to see this one in theaters. I have not seen a Wallace and Gromit in theaters. Even the first one, I just waited till it was out on DVD. But it's good. It's the same sort of stuff that you can expect from Nick Park. They always do great animation work. You can always sort of see the threads tearing a bit whenever they venture into this full feature territory, because they are more with Wallace and Gromit and with the Creature Comforts and with Shaun the Sheep. They are much more fitting to do this in short form storytelling format. It doesn't expand as well to long-term feature, but it still looks nice. It feels perfectly fine. It feels like a Wallace and Gromit movie. I liked it a fair amount. I don't know how that's going to fare for best animated feature. Honestly, Inside Out 2 is probably going to take it, but I really hope it doesn't. That was kind of a mediocre movie.
I forgot that was last year. It's been a long year.
I think Inside Out 2, the Wallace and Gromit, Memoirs of a Snail, and Flow are the only 4 I can think of. I think there are 2 other nominees, but it's like mid-range. It's a mid-range movie. It's perfectly fine. I don't hate it for any reason. I just think it sort of overstays its welcome. Those sort of things are better in short form. Anyways, aside from that, what else did I see in the theater? Why, I saw Wolfman from Wenel, who did the Invisible Man remake that we just covered last year, among other things. So I was looking forward to this movie because Invisible Man really surprised me. It surprised both of us in the level of quality there and what it was able to do with something that many would describe as a musty character property for Universal. Wolfman tries to go in the same direction. It becomes sort of a genre movie of like a killer in the house thriller coupled, like, butted up against a killer outside of the house thriller. And there's a clear delineation, I should say, between the second and third act that I think is in reverse. They really try to make it a character piece about, okay, well, a step back, the whole thing, very much like The Invisible Man, is taking this premise of, like, curses and inherited, sins of the father, that sort of thing with the Wolfman, and it's turning it into more of a Resident Evil style virus sort of thing. And it really focuses on the scientific aspect of it, and that's fine. I don't really find it all that interesting, but there are cool bits that they do, such as when the main character starts to become more wolf-like. There are scenes where it will transition between what is happening in the movie and what he is seeing and hearing, and it's very much like what a lot of movies would portray dogs as, blah, 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 and there's muted colors, and it's all like blues and blacks when it's his vision, and that's pretty cool, especially the editing between those transitions. It's pretty seamless. It just sort of flows from one into the other, and they sort of couple that with the fact that this is supposed to be a relationship drama in a horror movie between these two married individuals, but their relationship is strained, and clearly the daughter favors the father over the mother, and there's tension there. So they're trying to do more of a character piece with it, and I think to really accomplish that and drive it home, the events of the third act should have been swapped with the events of the second act a little bit, to sort of push that narrative of that character growth and development and what this man is willing to do for his family, really drive that home. They don't do that. It's a little tedious. No. There's an unnecessary twist in there that it's not like a super twist because it's something that you can call from a million miles away, and there's not like a stinger to underscore it. But for all intents and purposes, it is technically a plot twist or a plot reveal or whatever, and it kind of bogs the whole picture down. I wasn't really a fan of this. It was all over the place. It had some cool ideas, and like I said, he did a lot of good work with The Invisible Man, but this just was not my thing.
That's disappointing, considering, like you said, our enjoyment of The Invisible Man. But I am glad to see, like, he's at least still kind of... I'm glad that there's a greater and greater push to kind of go different directions with a lot of horror icons. I mean, the fact of the matter, with horror being such a generational concept, like every generation is going to have different relationships with horror for different reasons. And I think seeing it advanced in that way has been kind of the big reason there's been such a big renaissance of horror in the last even just kind of like decade or so. It just at least with it as a greater medium other than, the original Invisible Man, for as good as it was basically just kind of boiled down to what has science done? And, again, that kind of goes with the idea of generational fears. Like, advancing technologies and scientific developments kind of spurred on like a fear of, going too far, whereas now it's much more personal level things of paranoia and abuse and that sort of thing. And then seeing it not really advance with the Wolfman story beyond, oh, now it's kind of more of a virus thing. It's like, I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of COVID comparison there, being trapped in a house and a deadly virus, but, I feel like that might be a stretch. So it's a bit disappointing to see that it hasn't really gone that far, despite the fact that I really do feel like there's some mileage to be made with the werewolf story. I couldn't necessarily tell you what, but,
I do have some interest in that Bride of Frankenstein movie that is supposedly coming out later this year. I'm wondering what they're going to do with that. But
I know Del Toro is doing a Frankenstein piece that might be coming out this year or next year. It's got Oscar Isaac as Frankenstein. Not the monster. I mean, like actually the guy.
Yeah. I understand. I don't know how I feel. I hesitate to say this because I liked Del Toro's Pinocchio, but I kind of like it when he does his own takes on genres instead of. I don't know how he's going to be adapting a story, but again, I liked Pinocchio. We'll see what he does.
I'm hoping for once we actually get a Frankenstein that's closer to like the actual book, because I don't know if there's ever actually been a movie that's actually sticks to the book. It's always been kind of the rendition of like the original black and white film. The original book is really good. I actually really enjoy it.
They should make an anime adaptation of the Junji Ito Frankenstein. I think that would do wonders with the horror of it and just staying true to the themes of the original novel, because it's fairly 1-to-1, that manga.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I need to reread that one. It's been a while.
But yeah, aside from those two things, there's one other thing that we'll get to, or possibly two other things that we'll get to. But I've also been jumping all over the place. I always start off strong with the year as far as games go. I have a set of quote-unquote New Year resolutions as far as games are concerned for things that I want to complete in the year, and I kind of went hard on it, and I'm almost done with the list. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll just be free for the rest of 2025 to just do whatever I want. But I redid Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. I really like the Crash Bandicoot series. I've completed that game before, but I have not touched it in a long time. And in fact, I think the last version that I touched was the Insane Trilogy remaster from some years ago. So I got the original one running on proper hardware, and I went ahead and completed that. There's also a handful of things that I have played before, but I've never fully completed. Like I took care of Metroid Prime, Dredge. From a couple years ago, I finally took care of that and its DLC. Super Mario Land on the Game Boy, I finally took care of. Pikmin 2, I'm in the middle of. So, just an abundance of things. It's the same from a few years ago when I took on Luigi's Mansion, where it's like, these are games that I played and occasionally beat from my childhood, but I've never 100% completed them, which is my obsession. So I've gone back, and every now and then I will take these things on and be like, oh, it feels like that's a chapter from my past that I have finally closed. So I've been having a lot of fun with that, and that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, I've been doing a fair few games as well, but I'll go through my movies at least. I will say that the holidays tend to fucking obliterate me, so I didn't watch as many films as I would have liked. Or at the very least, if I did, I am fully forgetting them. Honestly, the last month and a half or so since we did our last proper episode, not our end of the year talk, have been busy. And so it's been difficult to kind of keep track of myself. So as far as films go, I don't really know if I've watched anything new other than what you and I watched, but I'll get to that one at the end.
Right. Or like the movie night things. I know we did Repo Man, Eyes Wide Shut, that thing Stephanie showed us. We've seen a couple of those.
But yeah, as far as otherwise, which will say most of those films that we did for a movie night were great, other than My Soul to Take. That one was awful. But the one that I watched with Hannah, at least recently, it was The Nice Guys, the Ryan Gosling and Gerard Butler, is it Russell Crowe? Sorry.
Yeah, Crowe.
I mixed them up for some reason. But the kind of comedy noir piece that they did some time ago, very underrated film, I will say. I'm surprised it hasn't gotten more love in the time since it came out, and I wish they had done more of those characters, like a sequel or something. But yeah, really, really funny piece, and just kind of, I like seeing Ryan Gosling doing sillier stuff. Like, I know everyone was kind of big on him doing Ken and everything, and he did fine in that, but I think this one's one of his better roles, in my opinion. It's really funny. Not a whole lot to be said with that. Hannah seemed to enjoy it, which is, always my goal.
I remember liking The Nice Guys a fair amount. The problem is, until you said Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe, I always get The Nice Guys mixed up with The Other Guys, which
Yep,
is the
that
Will
too.
Ferrell, Mark Wahlberg movie that I was not as hot on. And so
Yeah.
I always forget, it's like, which one of those was the good one?
Yeah, the Nice Guys. So like yeah, I'm kind of disappointed that they never did more with it, especially because the ending kind of leaves it open to be able to do that. But whatever. The sad fact of movies that try to set up like the background of these characters is like, oh, they are now the nice guys and they have their own team together, and then we just never hear from them again.
They're trying to do a Lethal Weapon thing, and sometimes
Yeah.
that works, sometimes that doesn't.
Beyond that, as far as specific films I've watched recently, I honestly cannot remember anything else in the period of time. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, and if so, I will bring it up later. But otherwise, the big focus for me has been a lot of games here recently. I've done a fair bit on my laptop here recently. Like, my big one, I'm trying to get back into Manor Lords, which it's kind of the early access city builder, but medieval. Um, it's fine. It's still got some rough edges, and I'm still kind of bad at the whole like economy management thing. But I have a deep love of assorted periods of history, the medieval period, of course, and so it's difficult for it to not scratch a little itch of mine. Also can't remember if I brought it up last time, but I got into Sons of the Forest, which I believe you gifted me
Oh, yes.
for Christmas, and that one's pretty cool. That one's I've been enjoying. I need to get back into it. I just kind of fallen off it for a minute just because it's a lot to kind of keep up with. It feels at times kind of, because I watched a lot of people play the original The Forest. It just never really seemed like my bag, just because I don't know, never really seemed like it scratched that itch. And the sequel seemed like it just kind of polished itself out a bit more. I will say at times playing it feels kind of weird, not least of which for the fact that it has this kind of power fantasy thing going for it in a couple of occasions, not least of which for the fact that the two friendly NPC characters have some kind of weird setup around them. I've not really seen anyone talk about it, but I feel like it's worth mentioning the fact that the first NPC character you have who's meant to be like your helper is they establish him to be a voiceless NPC by making him have brain damage, and then he's just basically like an unemotive, like just lackey. I don't know why that just always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like whenever they brought that up, it's like, what is stopping them from just having a dude who just doesn't talk? Why do they have to specifically bring up the fact that he's brain damaged after landing on this island? I don't know. That always just kind of felt weird to me.
It is strange. Well, also they sort of, because they kind of build around it, because you give him commands on a piece of paper and then you like slap it on his chest and it's like, yeah, look at that later if you can even read.
Right. And I'm just like, why did they feel the need to do all that when they could have just had a drop? Like, I know they try to do a thing of like integrating, commands into the world itself, like you're literally writing it on a piece of paper and showing it to him. But I really don't think that was worth all the effort when they could have just had like a drop down menu. It's like you go up to him, you hit a button, here's the options, and you just tell him to do it. It's like all the other effort of this kind of feels unnecessary and comes around to just being kind of creepy. So it's like, I don't know. It just feels like they were going to a lot of effort for all of that for kind of a wasted whim. But that's just me. I'm sure I'm making a bigger deal of it than I need. And otherwise, the game itself is fine. It's got an addictive quality. I at times don't really see the point of doing base building when really all you have to do is find like the one Segway vehicle and you can just whiz from one cave to the next and just get the story over with. So at times I just find myself kind of skipping a lot of shit. So to that end, I think if I just tried to have more direct enjoyment with it, I'd have a fine time with it. But it just seems like a lot of effort. That really does feel like the game. It feels like a lot of wasted effort in a lot of cases that don't really feel like it's worth the time spent. Like I could put up together a massive base with all these buildings, but that takes like 3 hours. Meanwhile, I could get on this zippy mobile and go from point to point to point to point across the entire island, and then I'm done.
I mean, I guess that's a sort of mileage may vary thing based on the types of games that you like and the mechanics that you enjoy. Because
Yeah.
I mean, you can catch rabbits in a rabbit trap and cook them, or you can catch rabbits and you can build in your base a rabbit hatchery and start having more rabbit. I mean, to a lesser extent, it's like the Minecraft thing.
Yeah,
Like
I guess so.
people have an enjoyment over making these elaborate farms and whatever, but then there are other people that don't care. They'll just make like a little dirt shack and they'll speed run the thing and put it on YouTube.
Well, normally I would be more the type to spend more time with it, but it's also the fact that building up a base immediately invites like the, mutant characters on the island to not leave you the hell alone. And so it just feels like I'm just beating them off with a stick, whereas just running from place to place means I avoid them for the most part. It's like, if there were some form of like leveling system that like encouraged me to like, okay, sit back and like do some grinding to be able to work yourself up. But as it is, like really the only thing stopping you is items, and you get items by going through the storyline. So
yeah, and I think that's where the traps come in, because it's like build these elements of traps around your base, and they do wonders. It's like, okay,
right.
Yeah, I have pikes everywhere and these string traps, and the mutants can't get in until CatDog shows up. The moment CatDog shows up, everything goes out the window because he's super long and he just stretches over the walls of your base and nothing affects him. I don't know what his point is other than to be a pain in the ass. But yeah, I don't know. I like the game. I think it improved a lot on the first one, and it's definitely more fun with other people. I have played it on and off with 3 other folks. We have a massive base. It's definitely one of those games where I don't think I would enjoy it at all playing it single player, which I bring up a lot of the time for a lot of games. It's like, this is a great game. I would never play this by myself.
So. And I'm a perpetual loner who's bad at multiplayer games, so. But yeah, that one was pretty fun. I've dropped off on it for a little bit. I'll probably get back into it. We got to see technically 2 things. The first one we actually got to see was our friend Stephanie's series of short plays that she had written for her local theater, which was really cool.
It was nice. A nice night at the theater. I don't go out much for those types of deals. So it was definitely an experience. I can't even think of the last play that I was at.
I mean,
I know
I can.
that you have more. I was going to say, I know you have more experience than I do, especially recently. But yeah, no.
Because my fiance's and stuff.
But it was nice.
Yeah, I think she's a really good writer, and I think it's I'm glad to see her stuff getting out there. I know she's been wanting to do stuff like that for a while, so. Well,
she's been writing for forever. I think she even said that, is that, she didn't explicitly write all of those for that. She might have tweaked them a bit, but she took bits and pieces that she had been writing for a while and then cleaned them up and sort of compiled them into this anthology that was presented, so.
Yeah. So, glad to see her doing that shit. But, the feature presentation of the weekend was we got to continue our tradition of seeing the Sonic the Hedgehog movies in person. So we saw Sonic 3, and it was silly, hilarious, and good. I feel it's a little rough around the edges, even compared to the first 2 at times, but not so much to the point where it wasn't enjoyable. The more I think about it, the more I'll see like plot holes and stuff pop up, and I'm just like, why did we do this? Or why didn't that get explained? But when the movie ends with what is effectively a Dragon Ball Z fight, it's just like, all right, sure. Like, whatever. It's hard to fault it too much.
No, I like the Sonic movies, and I actually prefer it when they don't over-explain things. Like, for example, okay, we have Shadow. Do they need to explain where the meteor came from? Do they have to relate that back to a specific planet or dimension that the characters we're familiar with come from? Not necessarily. I'm all down for it. I think they're goofy. I think that everyone involved with the cast actually likes making these movies. I don't see anyone that feels like they're phoning it in, which is great, especially for a third entry in something. And you know what? Something that I didn't think of at the time that has sort of come around is, I think I've complained since the first Sonic movie that I wish they would get away from the human family of Sonic, the human characters, and focus more on the actual Sonic characters because they're more interesting. And I think that Sonic 3 did a good job of pulling it back. For the first part is that the human characters do appear way less in Sonic 3, and we are focused more on actual Sonic the Hedgehog characters. But what they give the human, like Sonic's human family, to do in this movie is much more interesting and actually well structured, as opposed to like a fucking wedding that, where we get to hang around at for 20 minutes. Like, there's there's things going on. These characters are integrated into the story, and it's like, you know what? I'm coming around on these characters. It helps that the actors
serves the plot. Good.
Yeah, I like the movie.
I'm glad James Marsden's getting work. Like, I think he's a fine actor. Yeah. Jim Carrey as ever is just doing his Jim Carreyist. I think it's pretty certain that he might be for realsies gone this time, but, I've been surprised before.
Yeah, I am pretty I'm pretty against that fact. Just I mean, it is a lot. It seems much more finite than like Sonic 1 or Sonic 2 presented it as. I really do think that they just keep amping up the stakes. One, for the point of being ridiculous, and two, just in case Jim Carrey doesn't want to come back the next time. But I think if they asked him for Sonic 4 and he said yes, if those two conditions were met, they would just pull something out of their ass and I'd be perfectly fine with it. I'm confident
fair.
of that.
And I will say, even after we saw it, because like, you know, I'm going to give some mild spoilers here for Sonic 3 for the people that care. But at the end of the film, it seems pretty certain that both Eggman and Shadow die. And I expressed that as much. Turns out there is a second after credits scene that shows that Shadow actually does survive. So I was dead wrong on that one. I just didn't realize it.
We left too early. What are you going to do?
Yeah, we only saw the first one where see, I don't even know if I should say this or whether or not it's a spoiler.
You just said you just said a huge spoiler. We're already in spoiler town right now. So
good point. Yeah. Well, there's a mid credits roll where both Metal Sonic shows up and also Amy shows up. Doesn't have a voice or anything yet, but you know that happens. So that's. I'm interested to see where they're going to go with this, and I'm actually kind of hoping they do find a villain other than Eggman for the next one. I do think that there are other characters they could go with. Hell, if they wanted to be really wild, they could start bringing in stuff from like the current comic line, because isn't like the main, not necessarily antagonist, but at least foil to Sonic is that one Surge character, like a female kind of anti-Sonic, basically.
She seems
I think that'd be
she seems to skew more anti-hero, but more villainous of an anti-hero than someone like Shadow.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
I'd be down if they did that, like, because I think that'd still be just as much of an energetic character as Eggman, just kind of with a different direction. And you know, I think we need to just go ahead and bite the bullet and just like get into the fact that Sonic's from a different world, and the fact that Amy showed up and Metal Sonic showed up tells me that we're gonna be getting there. And I think we should at this point. We've been dancing around it for 3 fucking movies, so
I'm very excited. I'm very excited for what the future holds. I hope Eggman is not gone for good, just because he is like a main character of Sonic. He doesn't have to be a roped in bad guy or primary antagonist for 4 or 5, but it would feel just as weird as Shadow being dead if Eggman was dead in the Sonic timeline. It would be very strange, and while I'm watching Sonic 4, it would just be in the back of my head like, that doesn't seem right. Even if we're fighting fucking Mephiles and Iblis and whatever. But we'll see what they do. This isn't going to be until like 2028 or whatever, because thankfully they do take their time with these.
Which is wild of all the fucking franchises that actually takes their time with building their films.
Marvel, 3 a year.
But yeah, that's basically it after 45 minutes. Of like, I can't think of anything else I've been watching, so that'll have to do.
Yeah, that's wild. 45 minutes of raw audio recording. I know I'm going to cut it down from there, but hey, you know, without further ado, without further segue, we'll venture forth into our discussion on Marty. How about it? All right, for the sake of this conversation moving forward, first of all, remember that it's 2025, so a fresh reminder that if you want to skip over the plot synopsis, timestamps for that are always in the description of your podcasting app or YouTube video, whatever you're using to view or listen to this. Additionally, for today, I will just be covering the plot as a whole. I guess you could technically say from the 53 version of Marty if you wanted to, because these are quite literally the exact same movie. There are very minute differences, and we will surely be getting into those reasons and discussions later. But we will go ahead and start off with 1953's Marty, directed by Delbert Mann and written by Patty Chayefsky. Marty Poletti, played by Rod Steiger, is an Italian-American butcher who lives in the Bronx with his mother. Unmarried at 34, the good-natured but socially awkward Marty faces constant badgering from family and friends to settle down, as they point out that all of his brothers and sisters are already married, most of them with children. Not averse to marriage, but disheartened by his lack of prospects, Marty has reluctantly resigned himself to bachelorhood. After being harassed by his mother, Esther Minciotti, into going into the Stardust Ballroom one Saturday evening, Marty connects with Clara, played by Nancy Marchand, a plain high school science teacher who is weeping outside on the roof after being abandoned by her blind date. Marty and Clara spend the evening together dancing, walking the busy streets, and talking in a diner. Marty eagerly spills out his life story and ambitions, and they encourage each other. He takes Clara to his house, where he awkwardly tries to kiss her and is rebuffed. Clara then explains that she just didn't know how to handle the situation, and she does like him. At this point, Marty's mother returns, they have a brief conversation, and Marty takes her home. Meanwhile, Marty's Aunt Catherine moves in to live with Marty and his mother. She warns his mother that Marty will soon marry and cast her aside. Fearing that Marty's new romance could spell her abandonment, his mother belittles Clara. Marty's friends, with an undercurrent of envy, deride Clara for her plainness and try to convince him to forget her and to remain with them, unmarried in their fading youth. Harangued into submission by the pull of his friends, Marty fails to call Clara. That night, back in the same lonely rut, Marty realizes that he is giving up a woman who he not only likes, but who makes him happy. Over the objections of his friends, he dashes to a phone booth to call Clara. When his friends ask what he's doing, Marty bursts out by stating that he had a good time with Clara and intends on even potentially asking her to marry him. The movie ends with Marty on the phone with Clara, closing the door to the booth. Additionally, for the 1953 version of the film, we have Joe Mantell, who played Angie, Marty's best friend, Augusta Cioli, who played Aunt Catherine, Betsy Palmer, who played Virginia, and Lee Phillips, who played Tommy, both of which are sort of family members of Marty Poletti and his mother, who get much more play in the 1955 version of Marty, once again directed by Delbert Mann, and once again written by Patty Chayefsky. Second verse, same as the first. It's the same exact story. A lot of shot for shot in this because there's only 2 years separated and it has the same director. Basically, we transferred from a TV movie that was done as part of a series on play presentations, and it got a feature film adaptation. So you're going to get a lot of that. I like I mentioned before, we have the Virginia and Tommy characters who get a little bit more play. We get to see the turmoil of their lives as they're trying to get Aunt Catherine out of their house. There's more scenes with Marty loafing around with his friends. They expound on, or they expand the scene where Marty is actually taking Clara home that night and he punches a bus stop sign. There's a lot more, but it boils down to the same beats. So I'm just going to go through the cast real quick. Same core cast members. We have Ernest Borgnine, who was Marty Poletti. His mother was once again played by Esther Minciotti. Clara Snyder this time was played by Betsy Blair. Karen Steele played Virginia. Jerry Paris played Tommy. And then once again we have Augusta Cioli as Aunt Catherine. And once again we have Joe Mantell as Angie, Marty's friend. And that's pretty much it. I figure we'll sort of dive right into it. I don't know how much of a conversation we will have on differences versus we will comparing how things are adapted and change in the span of 2 years. But before we hit that note, and before I talk myself into a stupor, let's hit up Full Circle. All of these full circles, the 4 that we have, are for the 1955 feature film adaptation, none for the TV movie. Surprisingly, we have not discussed Rod Steiger up to this point, but that's fine. We'll be discussing him here, and, now we've set a precedent. But, without further delay, we have the big one, which is Ernest Borgnine himself, who played the titular character of Marty. He was also Cabby, the cab driver, in 1981's Escape from New York.
No, I don't remember that at all.
You're too focused on him being Mermaid Man to even think about Escape from New York.
Obviously.
The only important thing. Jerry Orbach, in his film debut, Jerry Orbach was the ballroom patron, or a ballroom patron, in 1955's Marty. We also saw him in 85's Brewster's Millions as Charlie Pegler. And, of course, he was the voice of Lumiere in the 1991 animated Beauty and the Beast. Jerry Paris was Tommy in Marty. He was also Tony Decker in 1957's 0 Hour, which listeners will remember being the inspiration for Airplane.
An odd parallel, it feels like.
And finally, Johnny Dennis played Andy in Marty, which was one of Marty's friends who wasn't Angie. He was an orderly in Frankenstein's class in Young Frankenstein from 1974. And that is it for Full Circle. Stu, take us away. Drum roll for Stu's opinions.
Oh, good lord. You know, I don't know what my immediate opinions are here. I think it's interesting to see how romantic comedies have advanced. If one could even call this a romantic comedy, but truly, I don't know what the hell else to call it.
It's not very funny. It's
no, but like I will say the 55 one is at least slightly funny at times. You know, the kind of like how they set up lines and things, like, you know, how where he's working at the butcher counter and, you know, it seems like, you know, he goes through one customer and then who's asking about him not getting married, and it's immediately followed by another customer who asks him the exact same questions. It's like, all right, that I feel like constitutes as funny. You know, it's more than it being dour, despite the fact that there are a lot of dour moments.
It's funny in that you're dealing with rude people at your place of work, especially because, lady, you were in line. You heard me have this conversation already.
You old bat.
Rude, awful people.
Yeah, that kind of feels like a bit of a trend in both of these movies, actually, is that everyone in it, other than even Marty at times, kind of comes off as kind of rude, actually. The only one who isn't necessarily rude is Clara. Because, I mean, there's even a few moments where, you know, at least especially in the original, where Marty just kind of seems a bit brusque with her, where you're like, you know, it definitely feels like they got kind of the rate, a good, it seems like these speeches that they give Marty kind of feel a bit more naturalistic in 55. And I think that's mainly just due to the fact of they're allowed to have more runtime.
There's more runway to actually give those speeches. I'll say to that end that in 53, with Rod Steiger playing Marty, he is sort of a dour, somber character that he feels like he's brushing people off at times, and I see a lot of that as the self-loathing. And that is a facet of the Ernest Borgnine version of the character in 55, but he talks so much. I'm like, I can see why people don't hang around you. You're fucking annoying. He does nothing but talk, which I think lends itself to those monologues, which there's a lot more of, and they last a lot longer because he just never stops talking.
That I did have a lot of moments like that. I will say, I tend to have, and I've brought it up before, whenever I'm watching one of the films for the show, and it seems like it's just dragging, and I feel like I'd like to just kind of get to the point, I'll just do like the 5-second, 10-second skip thing a couple of times, and, you know, either I'm just like either not fully engaged, or it's just like, you know, it's just not my bag, like with the conversation they're having. I had to do that a lot in 1955's Marty, because there are times where he is talking, and I do have an interest in what he's saying. Like when they're at the diner and they're chatting, he's talking about being in the service and everything. It's like, okay, yeah, this is kind of interesting. You know, it's talking about his background. It's like they're laughing and have a really good time. It's like, okay, this feels genuinely sweet, and I'm glad we get to have these moments for it, because I like seeing this character win. I think that's the biggest part of it. It's like I like seeing him being in a good position. And I'm glad that Claire actually enjoys talking with him. But dear God, it's still not enough to get over the fact that, yeah, he does not shut the hell up when it gets to the end of the day.
Yeah, that's never...
kind of shocking.
There's also... it's funny that you do feel for this character, and I think that's a testament to Paddy Chayefsky's original screenplay, the doctoring for this play, how it comes across, because this character can be, like, obnoxious and rude and annoying and manipulative, where he's like, oh, I get it. Yeah. He just wants a kiss. She doesn't want to kiss him, and he's like, yeah, I'm ugly. No one likes me. Whatever. It's like, dude, what the fuck? It's amazing how you can just come around 20 minutes later and be like, oh, victory for old Marty.
Yeah. Because at least it comes off, even when he does the thing that comes off as manipulative, it even then still kind of comes more off of he's immediately being down on himself more than being actively manipulative.
Well, yeah, I guess it's not malicious. It's not malicious in any way. It's just another, like, I wouldn't want to be around this guy for a prolonged period of time.
Right. Because, like, he could very easily turn into, I mean, God help me for making this reference, but, like, the Jerry character from Rick and Morty, where his entire character is just the fact of him being sad and pathetic, and that's kind of how he gets through life. It's like, Marty could have very easily have gone that way, but the fact that he is still shown to be human and have, like, funny things to say, and is actually trying his best, it makes you want to root for the son of a bitch. I root for the 55 one more than the 53 one. The 53 one definitely seems more, not malicious, but definitely dour to the point of, yeah, no, I think you deserve to be alone.
He's definitely more embittered. And part of this just comes. I know I was praising the screenplay and the writing of it, which do deserve props, but I think just in general, Ernest Borgnine has this giddy, childlike quality to him that, I mean, we were just talking about Escape from New York, or at least I was, because I remember the character. But that's what that cab driver character was, is he was super upbeat. He was like, yeah, sure, I'll take you to his place. And he drives Snake Plissken to see Harry Dean Stanton, and he's always smiling, even when he gets blown up in the end of the movie. Spoiler for a movie that's like 40 years old at this point.
I think we need to make it clear on this show that we care not for spoilers, so...
I think Borgnine just has that quality about him in how he carries himself, which does a great deal to... it does good work for the presentation of the character and how you root for him. Because this could definitely be played differently, and you'll get a different end result even if the dialogue is the same.
Yeah, I'm genuinely struggling to think of a thing to say. We have dealt with movies that are kind of thin in the past. I will say, prior to even getting to the end of this review, though, I think this might be the thinnest one yet. And I don't know how to take that. And I wish there was more going on in general. It's just, I'm genuinely floundering. I don't know what the hell to say. What am I doing? I feel like I'm losing my mind.
I wanted to start the year off with something lighter, and I think this is really... I've said it like 2 or 3 times, but I think this is a really interesting case in how, I mean, we have the same production team, at least the same executive production team behind the picture, and there's only a 2-year turnaround, and with the added benefit of budget, there's not much else that they did with it aside from elaborating on different key points. It's interesting how one-to-one this almost is. They try to bring about more of the lives of the characters, such as Virginia and Tommy. There's so much more with them in their home situation that it really does wonders, because it's just sort of, how do I phrase this? In the 53 television adaptation, the whole reason for Tommy and Virginia existing is just to offload the Aunt Catherine character, who sort of, in a roundabout way, pits Marty's mother against Clara, because she's, she convinces her that she's going to be out on the street in a month. But in the 55 version, they're like, okay, the beats are mostly the same. Let's take these 2 characters and sort of elaborate on them in a way that pits itself against the core theming of the movie. Because we have Marty and Clara, who are unmarried and are harangued by relatives about not being married and with children. And we get the juxtaposition against these relatives of the Polettis, their home life. They're constantly arguing. They seemingly hate each other or have an immense disdain for one another. And they are painting it as if it's a problem with Aunt Catherine being there. But the moment she's out of the house, I don't think things are getting better. It's so interesting to see, this is what people are wanting for Marty, is to rush into a relationship and have a home life that spirals out of control and causes him to have hatred for his own mother, who he's very close to. And I think that's, with just 2 years, they're like, okay, we're just going to build this into the movie. It works perfectly thematically. It's a great juxtaposition to the relationship of the main characters. That I like, for one.
I think also... Oh, yeah, you continue, sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. Go off of it.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of like... And I do am, have given the time to kind of think about it. Yeah, I guess that is kind of also building into a wider theme of... There seems to be almost a kind of cynical view of other people outside of Marty, and kind of this idea of, it seems like a very personal piece of... He's constantly getting harangued whenever he isn't having a girl, and then once he has a girl, he's getting harangued differently. It's like, it seems like people just want to wallow in different forms of misery, and they're just taking it out on Marty. Like, Marty is just this good guy who's doing his best and just hasn't really had a lot of luck in his life. And meanwhile, all the people who have basically gotten everything they've needed, everything they've wanted, have come to resent it. Meanwhile, Marty's just kind of okay with it. He's not necessarily happy, but he's not necessarily begrudging himself to the point of anger. He's clearly depressed, and he's clearly got some things to work past with that. but he's not attacking anyone as a result of it. He's trying to kind of keep to himself. And so it's, that's realizing that that's a very personal piece there of going, hey, here's this character, and here's all the people in his life who only know how to give him shit. And the moment it's going well for him, they just find a new way to give him shit. It's like, that sucks. It's like, and the fact that he's actually able to get past that is actually really cool.
It's a bucket of crabs.
It lends
New York
to him,
is a crab bucket.
Yeah, basically. It just, again, lends to the fact of Marty's quality of character, despite him, obviously having stumbles and having moments where he comes out, he becomes inadvertently manipulative. But at the same time, I'm sure the guy was basically like a drowning man. He was like, oh, sweet air. He probably, him reacting to the being scorned for the kiss and everything. It's like, yeah, he was expecting something and he kind of got led the wrong way. And he still got a kiss in the end, and they both seem to enjoy it. They both enjoy each other's company. And I don't know. I just think it's actually very sweet whenever you get right down to it. And I kind of realize why there is as much love for this movie. The fact that I got 17 awards, and maybe not fully, but I at least get the direction it's going.
It's a rare example of an adaptation. And again, I can't stress enough. Same executive production team, a lot of the same cast members. It was a play. It got a bigger budget, but it's a rare example of an adaptation where they made it longer by elaborating and adding more things into it. And I'm like, this all works for me. I think there's a lot more scenes between Marty and Clara post attempted kiss that sort of makes their relationship stronger. There are scenes that actually stick with me from 55 versus 53 because they are codas on impactful moments in the feature. Like I mentioned it earlier, but when Marty punches the bus stop sign in excitement after taking Clara home, that just sort of it is like the embodiment of his character, this boiling pot that's bubbling over of excitement and reveling in life. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, when his friends are sort of pulling him away from this his want of a date with Clara for New Year's, it just cuts to her at home on the couch with her parents, and it just goes to a close-up on her face. She's not sobbing, but her eyes are tearing up and there's water running down them. I keep thinking of that because it's like, I care for this character. I want her to get a phone call just as much as she wants it.
Feels like romance movies have gotten real complicated, haven't they? I think I'm just looking at this and going, man, we had such a straightforward idea of romance in the 50s. That's honestly kind of refreshing. But at the same time, again, for as much as I fully agree with all of these things, and it's great seeing it expounded, I don't know if I'm any less bored with the films.
No, that's fine. I like 55 and respect it for its craft, but this as a genre is not for me. And
yeah,
I have to sort of dig through and find things that I like here.
Can I be honest? I'm kind of shocked this won as many awards as it did. Like I said, I get why it won at least some, but you said 17?
It won 17 awards. 4 of those,
including Best Picture.
4 of those were at the Oscars, which was Best Picture, Best Actor for Ernest Borgnine, and I forget what the other 2 were. Probably Best Adapted Screenplay. Yeah, it was certainly all over the place. You know what? Let me pull it up because now I'm interested and I can't stop thinking about it. Best Motion Picture, Best Director for Delbert Mann, Best Actor for Ernest Borgnine, Best Screenplay for Paddy Chayefsky. And it was nominated for a bunch of other things, and then it won 13 other awards across Cannes and the British Academy and the Golden Globes. And yeah, so this was a big thing. And I mean, I don't know, maybe 1955 was a really light year for movies as far as Best Pictures. Maybe there were other better categories or better options. Love is a Mini Splendid Thing, The Rose Tattoo, Picnic, and Mr. Roberts. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, no, feels like a bit of a nothing burger comparison.
Yeah, I don't know what any of those are.
Yeah, no. There really were kind of light pickings from the period of like 1940 to like 1960, it feels like. Not universally, of course, but there's a big reason for that, namely war. But
I mean, From Here to Eternity and Casablanca. And there's a couple in there in the mix. Going
Yeah,
with the wind.
but you didn't get a stellar one every year, which I say that as if we get stellar ones every year nowadays. But the last few years, especially, good lord.
Here's hoping Conclave wins this year because I was kind of mixed on a lot of the. I don't know. I like Dune Part 2 as well, but I really like Conclave.
Yeah, Dune Part 2 doesn't need to be fucking Best Picture.
Yeah.
It's good. It's not that good. There's also that other one who was like, what, Elvira or something that was like really weird.
Honora?
Did I say Elvira? I said Elvira. I'm an idiot. There's one that's just like, it's just like someone's name is just the name of the thing. I can't remember exactly.
Amelia Perez is nominated.
That's it.
And yeah. It's like a cartel member or a cartel leader is trans, and it's about the trans experience. And I haven't seen it, but I looked at it and I was like, I mean, it looks like an interesting story, but it's also a musical, and all the songs I've heard from it are fucking abysmal. They are terrible songs. I'm like, how did this just get nominated for its subject matter?
I think so, because I've also seen
this
people,
is a bad musical.
I also saw people put a few scenes out of context, and they are garbage. Like, it looks pretty bad. So,
whoops.
Also, apparently, there's no more than one instance of brownface, and I'm like,
oh my god,
okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, which like that might just be hearsay at this point, but I feel like I've seen it mentioned enough times that it might actually be true. So,
guys, look, I understand that we want more movies that delve into subject matter like this, but maybe we shouldn't jump at the first chance we get either.
Yeah,
this does not look like a good movie.
It also, like, you know, it's also very much the fact of like that this is the one that's getting traction kind of speaks volumes for like all the other movies that are definitely about this subject matter that no one wanted to give half a damn about.
Yeah,
I know good lord, like I saw the TV Glow was like the big one recently, and I've barely seen anyone talk about that one, despite the fact that it apparently was very good.
I was a huge fan of I Saw the TV Glow. The main reason that it's not nominated for anything is because it's a horror movie. With the exception of Silence of the Lambs and kind of Shape of Water, if you look at it from a certain light, the Oscars,
and Black Swan.
The Academy does not. Black Swan's kind of horror. I always saw it as more of the thriller, but it has body horror stuff in it. The Academy, suffice it to say, the Academy does not give a shit about horror. I'm surprised that The Substance is up for anything this year because I love that movie, but it's fucking horror. It's body horror.
Yeah. God, that really shows where we're at with this film, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's fine that this is sort of a shorter exploration. I've hit sort of all the topics that I've wanted to. I like the Oscar and the award conversation. I haven't seen those other movies, but at least this has a core to it, and it's not just like an A to B storytelling. There is thematic relevance behind the plot, so it was probably deserving of what it got. But yeah, I think the genre and the type of movies aren't for me, but there's just enough behind the themes of storytelling and the actual craft of making a motion picture, and even just seeing the evolution of a story with just 2 years in between it. I think that there's a ton that 55 has to offer, whereas 53 it's less of an original versus remake and more like a prototype versus final release. Or like a beta versus, the movie's out now.
Yeah, which, you know, it's at least different from how they did it with the Maltese Falcon. The Maltese Falcon, they just made a better version of the movie. So, which is a rare case in this one. But this one, we're currently, you know, with Marty, that's a first time case for us of, hey, here's my first draft, and here's how it's actually meant to be done.
Exactly. And the funny thing about that is that I know for a fact that there are other examples of this that we could cover. I mean, even Alfred Hitchcock had one, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember what one it was, but he, like 5-6 years later, he's like, I'm doing that one again. So there, and even just this, because the 1953 TV version of Marty was filmed specifically for the Philco Television Playhouse. And I know for a fact that there were other entries of the Playhouse that got adapted into formal movies later on, like what's that baseball one? Bang the Drum Slowly.
Oh, yeah.
That we could do. So
we could do that one.
Yeah, we want to talk De Niro. Apparently, former topic of the podcast multiple time, former topic of the podcast, Danny Aiello taught Robert De Niro how to throw a baseball on the set of Bang the Drum Slowly. I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
Danny Aiello, notorious liar, but maybe that's true.
Oh, man.
Do you have any final thoughts on...
I mean, not really. I barely had any initial thoughts, to be fair. The 50 fun one... 50 fun one? Jesus.
It was...
My brain. The 1955 one is obviously the better of the two, but that's by the simple virtue of it's the same plot and same writing, just with a proper film budget and proper film length. So, I think Marty's story is fine. I think it's kind of interesting seeing this very cynical take of other people and how they kind of butt into other people's business. And I'm glad that ultimately they just made a decent character out of Marty. Beyond that, I couldn't tell you what the hell and I have to say about it.
Well, I can give you more to say if we want
Sure.
to step into brief question and answer territory here.
Sure.
Question of the podcast time. That's the theme that I made.
Okay, then.
Okay, so this may involve you just taking some semblance of knowledge or doing base level research, but I am curious if we could do a reverse situation here, which we've talked about in the past. So Marty
Sure.
55 to Marty 53. If you could take any Best Picture winning movie and create like a play adaptation, you could even think of it in the vein of Steph's plays that we saw recently, sort of a very a local art house sort of theater vibe. Do you, what would you do there?
Well, my cynical answer is going to be The Departed, and basically it's just Infernal Affairs.
Sure.
But to a serious answer, I would love to see how they could turn The Artist into a stage play. For the simple fact of it's about silent film and how it transitioned into talking film. I'd love to see if they could do that, but with when vaudeville eventually moved into film or like TV and that sort of thing, because that was a very similar, big cultural shift. Because vaudeville,
Right.
obviously, like a lot of vaudeville pieces, kind of had a hard time shifting over to the television world. And I don't know. I think it'd be kind of cool to see that, kind of step back, because it's basically you're putting on original vaudeville into modern, into the modern era, like how they were putting on a silent film into the modern era of talking film. I don't know. I think that would be an interesting take, and I'd like to see how they could go about that. Like maybe there's scenes like where they have to dress up in black and white when they're appearing on television or something like that. And ultimately, Artist is basically just another rendition of A Star Is Born, just kind of with a slightly different plot line. But still, there's a reason that movie's been remade so many damn times.
Yeah.
I'd say that. I think that'd be a good one to do. That, or maybe The Shape of Water, just because I think that would be incredible to see as a stage play. I think it's so stylized as it is already that you could actually do a pretty good job at creating a set for that. And then like just having a person who's just straight up in a water tank in the back of the set at all times. It's like, okay, let's see how that goes.
I would go see it.
Yeah.
I'd love to go see that.
So yeah, I'd say that would be a good one too. Probably better than The Artist, honestly, but The Artist seems like a more interesting take.
I think it is, and you could probably improve upon it and actually make The Artist good. So that would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be incredible, actually.
Oh, boy. Well, damn, you actually had, like, reason and thought behind your, like, the parallels between stage and film. That's a very concise and thought-out answer. Mine was basically just going to be, what would I like to see? As a play version of it. I think that Kramer versus Kramer, maybe. Like, just a family separation, legal-based drama about divorce, but on stage over 3 hours. I don't know. I'd watch that. Or maybe Amadeus, but it would be a musical.
That would be incredible. It's a musical with the lyrics set to Mozart music.
Yes.
That's insane, and I love it.
Because I think there are a couple that it's hard. There are a couple of Best Picture winners that it's hard to go backwards because it's like, oh well, we already have stage, like Chicago or Oliver, or so it's like we can't do those because those already exist. They already are formatted like stage plays and have some of them even have musical adaptations on the stage or play adaptations on the stage, so it doesn't count. But I think that we came up with 4 solid choices.
Yeah, I'd say man, I was chomping at the bit for like a critical analysis there, I guess. I was like, yeah, fuck it. I think there's a lot of good parallels to make in these situations. And again, also just the snide comment of The Departed, because I think anything could improve on that. Check checkbox, whatever the fuck. Don't have anything else to say. I think my brain is fully shut down. I don't know what's going on.
That's fine. Yeah, if you have no question for me, then we will move right along into
And I couldn't tell you.
2025 socials, baby. So go ahead and follow us on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. We are on the likes of Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Podbase, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube. We are hosted by Spotify for podcasters, though. Glory to Spotify. May you continue to gobble up smaller companies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like and
What's a monopoly?
Favorite, leave reviews, and all that good stuff. You can also send us an email, theyremadeit@gmail.com, with suggestions for future podcast episodes. We've gotten 1 or 2 here recently that we may be acting on in the future. You can also just tell us, what you like about the podcast, what you don't like about the podcast. Did you even listen to it? Are we gross nerds? And go ahead.
Go ahead and finish that up. Then I'm going to make a shout out.
Go ahead and follow us on. theyremadeit.bluesky.social. We are not on Twitter anymore. I deleted that account. Go ahead and follow us on Blue Sky for updates on when episodes are going live, what we've been watching in the interim, or playing, or reading, or listening to, or whatever. Possible things that we could cover in the future, and They Remade It diagrams, or maybe videos, regarding folks that we've covered in the podcast multiple times in the past. I am working on revitalizing some of our social media content into something that I'm more proud of or can tolerate now that I have revitalized our thumbnails. And hopefully it turns out well. There hasn't been a full circle post in a while, especially because I'm trying to make that look the way I want it to. But that's it for socials.
7 years in putting effort into things.
Imagine
specifically. But I'll just take this, end of episode moment to be able to shout out a wonderful comment we got on one of our more recent episodes posted to YouTube, which I believe went something to the effect of, who would listen to these 2 gross nerds?
It's beautiful, honestly.
It's so perfectly put. It's just like, I couldn't ask for anything more than that. It's like, yeah, who would listen to these 2 gross nerds? And it's just, I don't know why.
The funny thing is that it's a perfect coupling too, because not too long before that, we got a comment on our 2001 episode on YouTube that was like, "Man, I love this movie. Thanks for the podcast. I love listening to you guys talk while I'm cleaning my garage," or whatever it was. And then just a little bit later, it's like, "Who wants to listen to this? This is trash." And it's the perfect culmination, the yin and the yang.
It's so good, and it genuinely lifted my heart just seeing just like such a straightforward piece of hate. It's like, man. It's so. I want to put that on a little plaque and hang it up. Just who would listen to these 2 gross nerds? It's like, yeah, who would? Like, you guys would. The fact that you're listening to our voices means you like these 2 gross nerds, and for some goddamn reason, it's like, who knows? Maybe we get put on by mistake. Maybe it's someone learning English for the first time. In which case, my deepest condolences that we are your example of English.
Yeah, that's an upsetting thought.
That's a horribly upsetting thought, and I'm so sorry to have brought that into the world.
Happy 2025, everybody. Looking forward to the year.
Happy 2025. These 2 gross nerds are still going strong. As always, I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
Thank you so much for listening.
And one fact I gotta face is that whatever it is that women like, I ain't got it. I chased after enough girls in my life. I went to enough dances. I got hurt enough. I don't want to get hurt no more. I just called up a girl this afternoon. I got a real brush off, boy. I figured I was past the point of being hurt, but that hurt. Some stupid woman who I didn't even want to call up. She gave me the brush. No, Ma, I don't want to go to Stardust Ballroom because all that ever happened to me there was girls made me feel like I was a bug. I got feelings, you know. I had enough pain. No thanks, Ma.
Marty,
No. I'm going to stay home tonight and watch the hit parade.
you're gonna die without a son.
So I'll die without a son.
Oh, Marty, put on the blue suit, huh?
Blue suit, gray suit. I'm just a fat little man, a fat, ugly man.
You not ugly.
I'm ugly, I'm ugly, I'm ugly.
Marty.
Ma, leave me alone!